Hello, everybody. My name's Dave, and I want to tell you about my encounter, such as it was, with Buckminster Fuller. Excuse me while I play with a couple of things here. And it was in about 1980. He came to the University of Calgary, and he was going to speak at McEwen Hall. And Buckminster Fuller, I didn't know it at the time when I went to see him. I was about 18 years old. One of the most prolific inventors, one of the first true, genuine earth scientists, and a man who basically devoted his entire life to humanity. Anyway, he was speaking in Calgary, University of Calgary. We got there. McEwen Hall is a fairly large room, but already every chair in the entire room had been filled. And in addition to that, the lobby was packed with people who had come to see this guy speak. And at the time, I still didn't really know who he was. And anyway, in a rare form of generosity given the circumstances, something we would never be able to do today, the fire marshal decided that, all right, we'll let everybody go in, just find a seat wherever you can. And so, young guy, 18, we rushed in. I was sitting no farther from the stage than right there where the camera is, and a microphone stand, and out came, Buckminster Fuller. Now, I want to set up a couple of other things first before I tell you the rest of the story. I want to talk a little bit about all the goings on in Paris, how intelligence networks and armory robberies and pregnant women hanging from windows with one arm for prolonged periods of time, and all sorts of other anomalies about the circumstances there, lead me wondering if the story we're being presented is informing us or influencing us. And, in light of the fact that very soon Paris will have the Agenda 2030 conference, which will put a global carbon control matrix around the entire planet. And if you consider that if you control the energy of a culture, you control the finances of a culture, you basically get to decide who lives or dies. This is eugenics with a humanitarian face. Kind of like Bill Gates, that kind of goofy smile, right? That's exceedingly dangerous. And we are heading into a period of mass insanity. They say, I don't know who said this, but, men go mad in herds and only come to their senses one by one. And it genuinely feels like our entire culture is in a trance. And when you consider the Paris television bombardment, akin to trauma-based mind control, you can see that the powers that be are really trying to stir up negative energies, and they're using it to embolden and empower themselves. And but the difficulty is, if you push against it, you just become it. And if you you can't be passive about it either. It's a consciousness shift. You cannot solve this issue at the same level as it was created at. And that's the force that is supposed to kind of help us grow. Buckminster Fuller said we would hit the wall with this culture being structured the way it is. He pointed out in his speech that most technology was developed along military applications, and so basically the whole thrust of our scientific and technological growth has been to kill more people with less stuff. And even Zbigniew Brzezinski said recently that, it's a lot easier to kill 1 million people than it is to control them. And there is a mass awakening going on, but there is also a deep hypnotic trance that many people are experiencing that I know they would not wish to create the outcomes we're having, but the reality is we're living in a very sick, psychopathic, corporatized world. And if you've ever seen the documentary, The Corporation, it's quite interesting that they did an analysis of corporate structures, and their personality, if they were human, would be akin to a psychopath. We're living literally in a psychopathic culture. So we need to awaken, and we need to recognize that to ignore harm and to ignore problems, protecting ourselves is akin to a sheep rolling over for a wolf before the wolf eats its belly out. I mean, it's the epitome of weakness, and not the epitome. It is not awareness. That is not an aware place to come from in this situation. To deny your own humanity for the sake of a little comfort is the true definition of insanity. We just live in it every day. So, anyway, it was quite a telling speech, and he showed how there is more than enough to go around. There's more than enough food. There's more than enough energy. There's more than enough water. You notice now they're coming up with all these, we're running out of fresh water. We're going to start penalizing house owners. You guys can't have water. This is eugenics. This is genocide. Why do you think they're importing all these people who are insisting that they won't assimilate into cultures that are far too kind and far too trusting and far too softened up to manage the potential chaos? It took 8 people in Paris to kill hundreds, and we don't really know who they were. There was one reporting of a shooting at one of the cafes where the gunman was described as white, muscular, and with a very much a military bearing. Bingo! That doesn't sound like a bunch of Saudis. And by the way, it's the U.S. that's illegally in Saudi or in Syria, according to international law. And the Russians who were there at the invitation of Assad, so they're on the correct side of international law. So maybe, and since Putin's been there, 1 million Syrians have gone home. So maybe we should, what's going on here? I think there's an economic war going on, and this Paris summit is the culmination of a global government, global tax, global police forces. Do you know now there's international manhunt? The lexicon, just watch what they're doing. This is a power grab for the planet. And if we, and you notice they've now got it so that no dissenting voices can be heard in Paris, even though there's been fraud on top of fraud with all these studies. They never talk about Fukushima and the poisoning of the Pacific and what we maybe could do as a human species to fix that problem. And they never talk about geoengineering or incorporate any of that information in their models, all the spraying of barium and aluminum. And there's patents all over the place, weather modification. It's been going on. It's been going on for years. There's a video I did of the stuff that's probably in all of us that, who knows what they're doing. They're trying to literally take over the living space. They're literally trying to mimic and overcome nature. This is psychopathy. This is insane. And but the one thing these guys don't like is to be ridiculed. And the one thing they don't like is for people to recognize that their power is paper thin. And especially when you consider that while maybe only 80 families own $300 million worth, or 300, half the wealth of the planet, a lot of those are digital dollars. A lot of those are ephemeral connections to a connection that, just like the Soviet Union at one point might seem impenetrable, but the next might just collapse. But the reality is we have to approach this from a different consciousness that doesn't resist it but witnesses it and calls it, and points out how, shines a light on it to show just how dirty and how sick it really is, right? So the reason I'm wearing the glasses is because I'm going to sing a little song for you. But before I do, I just want to tell you, the funny part of that Buckminster Fuller encounter was at the end of his speech, and he spoke for 2 hours. This 80-year-old man who probably died a year or two later. And, he would talk for 2 hours about the fact that there's more than enough to go around, that we need to get away from weaponry and start moving into livingry, right? He showed maps of the world, talked about how the wealth kind of drifts from east to west over time, and again, he talked about how most technological development was developed around military applications, and such that even things like the fridge was first invented to store blood near the battlefield, and then what do you know, they figured, hey, we could turn this into an appliance, and that it's our mindset. And anyway, he talked, and then all of a sudden he just stopped. He was done. He'd had enough. And of course, everybody gets up and applauds and cheering at the top of their voices, and he's just standing there. He sort of acknowledged it, but not really. And then he walked up to me, and he wanted me to help him take his microphone off his shirt, right? And everybody's cheering, and I too was blown away by the depth of the information and still trying to process a lot of what he had to say. And I went up and I tried to figure out how to take this microphone off his shirt, but I couldn't, and he got frustrated with me, brushed me off, and walked away. It wasn't a glorious encounter, but it was an encounter with one of the great minds of mankind, and like Nikola Tesla, he knew that, Tesla always talked about how the structure of the Morgans and the rest of it would never allow free energy into our lives because it takes away their ability to control. And I've heard also, when you look at Buckminster Fuller and the way he gave his life to humanity, that's the way we all need to live. We're given this illusion of scarcity, but it's an illusion. And there are opportunities out there if we can be aware enough to see the opportunities that are right before our eyes. And I believe in freedom. I believe that humanity is best served by not having psychopaths run everything. And I didn't agree. I do not agree. I will not agree to handing over my sovereignty to a bunch of frauds just because they insist on it. This is dedicated to you. It's called Polar Bear.
Well, the world is in trouble, and you said you'd do your part. And though the path ahead of us is daunting, one place we can start. Know this comes a bit of a shock, and sorry, sir, it's true. You're saying, Polar Bear, we're gonna have to kill you. We always said the earth was dying, and the reason why. And you said you'd step in, do your part. Tell me, sir, was that just a lie? I'm standing shocked and anger, I might feel just a little blue. Lord, say